We started that morning like two polite neighbors sharing a ride. Me, Rachel, 47, with a careful smile and a thermos of coffee, and Alexander with his reliable old Satan and a map he didn't really need. But somewhere between mile markers and memories, he told me something I never expected to hear. It didn't just change the air inside that car. It unlocked a door in me I thought I'd nailed shut for good. By the time the afternoon light slid across the dashboard, both of us had said things we'd been afraid to say for years, and what happened next still surprises me when I think about it. Before I begin, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Are you in Chicago, Sacramento, Miami, or a small town off a 2-lane road with a diner that still remembers your order? I'd love to picture you there as I tell this. We pulled onto the highway just after sunrise, the world still quiet enough that you could hear the soft rattle of coins in the cup holder when we hit a seam in the pavement. Alexander had cleaned his windshield so thoroughly the sky looked like it was painted new, a pale watercolor of blue and leftover cloud. He wasn't much of a talker, at least not at first, but he had the radio low on a classic station, the kind where the DJ sounds like an old friend telling you stories you forgot you loved. Gas station coffee. He asked, one hand on the wheel, the other gesturing toward the thermos I cradled like something precious. Home brewed, I said. 4 scoops, pinch of cinnamon. Want some? He nodded, and I poured carefully as the road straightened. His hands were map reader hands, calm, deliberate, like someone who doesn't mind taking the scenic route if it means seeing a little more. We decided to share the drive because it made sense. 2 neighbors needing to go in the same direction, splitting gas, splitting the miles. He had to see his sister about a family matter. Had said it gently, like the details didn't belong to the morning yet, and I'd said I wouldn't mind the change of scenery. We passed fields that could have been sleeping giants under quilts of fog. A hawk floated above us like it was tethered to the sun. The sedan hummed the sort of steady hum you feel in your knees. Between us, the console was neat. Napkins, a tiny bottle of hand sanitizer, a paper map that looked folded by someone who loved the geometry of it. I touched the map once and he smiled. Backup, he said, for when the phone loses faith. I laughed because my phone had been losing faith in me for years, messages from people who wanted something I didn't have anymore, or offers for things I didn't want. The truth is that I had grown quiet over time, the way a room grows quiet after a party when everyone's gone home and the ice melts in the glasses. You might not notice it right away, but the silence is a living thing. I'd been living with it a long time. He cleared his throat at the state line and said, "May I tell you something, Rachel?" Of course, I said, and heard how careful my voice sounded. Like I was stepping onto a dock I wasn't sure would hold me. He didn't rush. He slowed a hair, kept the car straight as a seam down a shirt. I haven't driven this highway in 5 years, he said. I told you I don't like interstates. That was almost true. The truth is, I've avoided this one, the exact one we're on, since the day my wife died. Not because anything happened here. Because this is the road I took home from the hospital. The radio went on playing, but low, like it knew how to listen. I looked at him and then back out at the road. Somewhere far ahead a semi changed lanes, signal winking like a tired lighthouse. I asked you to come, he went on, because I didn't want to do it alone. I didn't want to tell you that at first, but it felt wrong to ask for company without telling you what kind. I breathed in because breathing out felt like too big a promise. Thank you for telling me, I said. The words were small, but they were the only ones that didn't feel like a lie. What was her name? Elena, he said, and it sat in the car like a word you're not supposed to drop. We were married 26 years. She liked ugly postcards. the uglier the better. We had a drawer full of sunsets that looked like they'd been painted with a Cheeto. I laughed, and it surprised both of us, the kind of laugh that breaks a spell and then becomes its own spell. I could see her then, a woman with a drawer full of tacky sunsets, a woman whose name still changed the air. He tapped the steering wheel twice, a habit maybe, a punctuation mark. "There's a voicemail," he said. "I still listen to it sometimes. I should probably delete it. That's the script, right? Move on. But I don't. It's how she sounds when she's laughing with a mouthful of almonds." I looked down at my hands, still with the faint scent of cinnamon from the thermos. "Scripts are for movies," I said. "We get a life." He glanced at me then, long enough to say he'd heard me. He didn't offer to play the voicemail, and I didn't ask. It felt like a secret we were both allowed to hold without touching. The miles softened after that. I noticed his collar was a little frayed where it met his neck, the way shirts get when they've been washed enough to tell their own story. My knee kept time to a song I couldn't name. The sun lifted, and with it some weight I hadn't expected to feel moving. At a rest stop with a mural of a river no one had bothered to repaint since the 90s, he parked beneath a cottonwood. The leaves tossed light around like confetti. We got out and stretched in that quiet way strangers do when they are almost friends. The vending machine coughed up a bag of peanuts, and we split it. When our fingers touched over the little foil packet of salt, he paused and asked, "Is that okay?" I nodded. It was a simple gesture, but he asked, and that asking steadied something in me. You get used to taking up as little space as possible when you've taught yourself for years not to need much. Consent can feel like someone handing you a warm coat after years of pretending not to be cold. Back on the road, I felt my silence shifting like a sleeping animal that just realized it wasn't alone anymore. There are things I hadn't told anyone, not because they were shameful, just because they were tired, and you get tired of explaining your tiredness. My marriage had not so much ended as quietly rolled to a stop in a parking lot with a burnt-out light. My daughter had moved to the other side of the country with a sweet man who taught high school history and believed in field trips to obscure museums. I'd been sleeping with the TV on for months. None of it sounded like a confession. It sounded like weather. But weather wears you down. Alexander adjusted the air slightly. "If you want me to change the station, say the word." "It's fine," I said. "I like when the DJ tells stories." He smiled. "Me too." Somewhere past a billboard advertising a fireworks outlet and a realtor with an optimistic smile, he said, "May I ask you something?" "You may," I said, because somehow it mattered that he asked first. "You've been quieter than usual lately." "Not just today." "Around the building, I mean. Did someone tell you to shush, or did the world just get loud?" The question pried open a small window in me. I stared at the horizon line until it steadied. The safe answer was right there. Busy at work, not sleeping well. And maybe it would have been enough. But then I thought of the way he had said Elena's name, like setting down a glass without spilling, and I decided I wanted to be that careful with my own truth. "My husband and I separated last spring," I said, the words feeling like clean water and gravel. "We were married 21 years. We loved each other the way people love a photograph of themselves when they were younger, tenderly, but mostly for what it remembered. We're kind to each other. We're just done." I didn't tell many people because I didn't want to audition for a part in anyone's story. I'm not a poor thing. I'm just a person, a middle-aged woman, learning what my voice sounds like when it isn't introducing dinner. He didn't reach for a platitude or a fixer's toolkit. He let the road hold the moment while he stayed in his lane. "Thank you for trusting me," he said finally. Would you like me to drive a little slower?" I laughed again, a softer laugh. "No, but I would like another peanut." He shook some into my hand like ceremony. Somewhere, a field rolled out in a crush of green. A red barn kept watch with one eye closed. Traffic thinned and thickened like breath. There was a curve that made the river appear as if we'd conjured it. Maybe it was only a sliver of water between trees. Maybe it was more. He turned the radio down to a murmur and said, "There's a scenic overlook a couple miles ahead. Would you be okay stopping?" "I would," I said. And I was. We parked where the guardrail bent away and let the river spray out below us like a story no one had gotten around to telling. The sky had warmed by then, a good buttered yellow that made everything gentler. Alexander leaned on the hood with his palms flat, as if he needed the car to know he wasn't done with it yet. I stood beside him and matched his posture. The metal was sun-warm under my hands. "I've been carrying around a question for a while," he said. "It's not big. It's not small. It's one of those questions you tuck in your pocket and pretend isn't there. Can I ask it?" "You can," I said, and felt my heart do a small, skittering thing in my chest. Consent again, so simple and so rare. "Why do we pretend we're fine," he asked, "when we're not? I mean people our age, late 40s, 50s. We act like feelings are for youngsters and complications are for the movies. Meanwhile, it's a mess inside some days. Did we make a deal with time I didn't read?" I found a little smooth rock near my foot and rolled it with the toe of my shoe. "Because it's easier," I said. "Because we don't want to scare people away. Because there are groceries to buy, and the cat needs shots, and the news won't stop shouting. Because we were never taught how to say, 'I'm lonely,' without looking like a request." He nodded, eyes on the water. "I'm lonely," he said, and the words didn't sound like a request. They sounded like a fact, like saying, "That is a river." I stared at the river, then at his hands, then back to the river. I could feel my silence gathering itself to run again, the way deer tense before bounding. But then I remembered the drawer of ugly postcards, and the laugh with almonds, and the way he'd asked permission to touch a packet of peanuts. I reached across the small country of carhood between us and placed my hand palm up, an offering, not a demand. "If you'd like to hold my hand," I said, and my voice didn't shake, "you can." He didn't move for 2 beats. 1, 2. Then he placed his hand in mine as if he were setting down a teacup in his grandmother's kitchen. No hurry, no clatter, just thanks. We stood with the colors of the day brightening around us and the small warmth of our joined hands doing more work than I'd expected it to do. "This helps," he said quietly. "It does," I said, and I meant it. No fireworks, no declarations. Just 2 people who were old enough to know the cost of pretending and the price of relief. He let go first with a small squeeze that felt like punctuation, comma, not period. We got back in the car and the world resumed its business. A motorcyclist passed us with a friendly wave. A man in a truck drove with a dog that liked to put its snout into the wind like it was smelling the entire nation, one county at a time. We talked more freely after that, but not like teenagers tumbling over a fence to tell each other everything. We spoke like neighbors who had agreed to stop walking the long way around the truth. He told me about the plant his wife had never been able to keep alive, and how he'd somehow learned the trick after she died, and now it was showy and thriving in the sun like it wanted to embarrass them both. I told him about the painting class I'd signed up for and never attended, how the brushes still sat in their plastic like a promise I kept delaying. He said he liked the way the word cobalt felt in his mouth. I tried it and liked it too. At a diner off exit 142, where the pie slices sat in a glass case like trophies, we took a booth by the window. The waitress called everyone honey and had a bee tattoo on her wrist to prove she meant it. We ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup because the day called for something kind and uncomplicated. When the check came, he slid it my way and raised an eyebrow. I slid it back. He smiled and tucked a few bills beneath the sugar caddy with the ease of a man who knew how to buy lunch without making it a lesson. As we stood to leave, he touched the back of the booth lightly and said, "May I say one more thing?" "You may," I said, and felt again how good those words were on the tongue. "I asked you to come with me today because I knew the road would be hard," he said. "But what I didn't expect was how good it would feel to hear your voice in the morning. I like your voice, Rachel." The compliment was simple, but it landed like a stone in still water, rings widening. I thought of all the ways my voice had been used, reading grocery lists, leaving messages with doctors' offices, telling my daughter to text when she got home, explaining to my soon-to-be ex that we'd already said goodbye in all the ways that mattered. I had forgotten that I could use my voice for something as small and tender as being liked. On the way back to the car, the afternoon had warmed into that Hanai time when shadows get soft, and the sky decides it will try a little pink later. I opened the passenger door and paused with my hand on the frame. A question rose up, unexpected, a little wild, like a bird that had been perched behind my ribs all morning. I slid into the seat and set my bag by my feet. He started the engine, and the classic station returned like we'd put the day on pause, and now it was ready to continue. He glanced over, waiting for me to buckle, and I looked directly at him in the square summer light that made the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes look like good roads on a clean map. "Alexander," I said, "if I tell you something that scares me, will you promise not to fix it? Just listen." He turned the radio down to an almost nothing hum and said, "I promise." I took a breath, felt the belt click across my shoulder, and found my courage in the ordinary rhythm of the blinker ticking before we pulled back onto the highway. "I think I'm ready," I said, the words a little breathless but true. Ready to stop living like a silence, ready to paint with the brushes I never opened, ready to say my daughter's name without worrying if it sounds like a loss, ready to be looked at without flinching. I don't know what that means yet, not entirely. But today, the river, the peanuts, your Elena, my marriage in the rear view. I feel something in me waking up. I wanted you to know. He didn't say, "Good for you," or "It's about time," or "Here's a plan." He did something better. He turned his palm up on the console between us, an invitation I could accept or decline, and waited. I placed my hand in his, not because I needed saving, but because I wanted company while I learned to save myself. He closed his fingers gently, like closing a book on a chapter you're not finished with yet. Outside, the world kept being the world, billboards and barns, and a sky already practicing its evening colors. Inside, the car felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just more true. We drove on, toward a conversation I had spent years avoiding, toward a sister I had never met in a town with a main street I could already imagine, and toward a choice I didn't know I would make before the day ended. And if you're watching from whatever city you call home, you'll understand why the next thing he told me at the turnoff sign would take the breath right out of my chest, and why what I said back would change the way I heard my own name. The turnoff sign came into view with its chipped green paint and bent metal edges, the kind that had weathered decades of rain and snow. Alexander flicked on the blinker, and the steady tick-tick filled the silence between us. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with the knowledge that something important was about to happen. This wasn't just another exit. It was the one he had avoided for years, the the one leading back to memories he had walled off. The car eased onto the narrower road, lined with maples already beginning to hint at autumn's fire, even though summer still clung to the air. Their leaves rustled against each other like quiet applause, as if encouraging him forward. Houses appeared sporadically, small farms with peeling barns and porches sagging under flower pots. I leaned back into the seat, watching the town slowly gather itself around us. "Are you ready for this?" I asked. He kept his eyes on the road. "No, but sometimes ready just means you don't turn the car around." That answer sat between us like truth often does, uncomplicated, heavy, and undeniable. The closer we came, the slower he drove, as if time itself had stretched to give him room. The town appeared in fragments. A water tower with faded white paint spelling out its name in letters almost lost to rust, a church steeple catching the sunlight, a feed store with bales stacked high by the door. Children darted between bikes, their laughter cutting the still air. A man in overalls swept the stoop of a hardware shop, pausing to wave as though everyone deserved greeting. It wasn't my town, but there was something familiar in its plainness, something grounding. Finally, he pulled into a driveway edge with cracked concrete and weeds growing bold in the gaps. The house was a modest brick, a little weary but still standing with dignity. A wooden porch swing leaned to one side, creaking gently in the warm breeze. A wind chime sang a hesitant melody, like it hadn't been touched in months. Alexander turned off the engine. The silence that followed wasn't the soft kind. It was full, dense, pressing against us. He gripped the wheel a little longer than necessary, his knuckles pale. "She hasn't seen me since the funeral," he said. We ended on words I wish I could take back. Harsh words, and I let them sit there for years. I looked at him, at the lines time had carved around his eyes, at the courage it took to even be here. "You don't have to have the perfect words today," I told him gently. "Just knock. Let the rest happen." His gaze shifted to me, eyes raw but steady. "Will you come with me?" "Yes," I said without pause. "Of course." We walked the cracked path together, step for step. The door loomed larger than it should have, not because of its size, but because of the years it guarded. He rang the bell, and time stretched. Then, slowly, the door opened. She stood there, his sister. A woman in her early 50s, perhaps, her dark hair streaked with silver, flour dusted across her apron. Her eyes landed on him, widened, then softened all at once. For a moment, neither spoke. Years of silence hung like a curtain. Then her hand lifted, not to block him, but to steady herself against the frame. "Alexander," she whispered, voice catching on the edges of memory. He didn't stumble forward. He didn't rush. He simply opened his arms, and she moved into them. The hug was awkward at first, stiff with forgotten practice. But then I saw her shoulders shake, and his chin lower to rest against her hair, and the stiffness melted. They were brother and sister again. I stepped back, giving them space. I had no role in this reunion other than to witness it, and witnessing was enough. Inside, her kitchen smelled of rising bread and strong coffee. The table bore the marks of years, knife nicks, faded rings from mugs left too long. She set out 3 cups, no questions asked. Slowly, conversation emerged, halting at first, then flowing with the uneven but real rhythm of siblings rediscovering common ground. They spoke of Elena, not in whispers, but openly, of her laugh, her postcards, her stubborn streak. Tears came, but so did laughter, like sunlight breaking through after rain. At one point she turned to me. "And you are?" "A neighbor," I answered. "But today I'm just someone who came along for the ride." Her smile was warm, her eyes kind. Sometimes those are the best people to have around. Hours slipped by in that kitchen. The bread came out golden, crackling as she cut it, and we ate it with butter that melted instantly. The three of us shared silences that weren't heavy anymore, silences that gave room for breath. When we finally rose to leave, she wrapped a loaf in foil for us to take. It was a simple gesture, but it carried forgiveness, carried love. Back in the car, twilight had begun its slow descent, the sky a tapestry of purples and oranges. Alexander held the loaf carefully on his lap for a moment before setting it on the back seat. He let out a long breath, the kind that feels like it comes from years, not lungs. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for coming with me, for hearing me, for not letting me do this alone." I turned to him. "You don't owe me thanks. I needed today too, more than I knew." The headlights carved our way back onto the highway. He glanced over at me then, his expression gentler than I'd ever seen it. "Rachel, you weren't just company. You were an anchor. I didn't realize how much I needed one until now." The word lodged in my chest, not as a weight, but as a gift. For years, I had felt like driftwood, floating, bumping into the edges of other people's lives. But anchor, it was a word of grounding, of mattering. I opened my hand on the console between us, palm up. This time he didn't hesitate. His hand found mine easily, warm, steady. No urgency, no pressure, just presence. The miles slipped beneath us. The road stretched long and dark, stars beginning to scatter like shy confessions overhead. The hum of the engine was low, almost soothing. I realized something as we drove. Silence no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like space, like possibility. We talked in low tones as the night deepened. He told me how he had started tending to a plant Alina once could never keep alive, how now it flourished like a stubborn testament. I told him about the painting brushes still wrapped in plastic in my closet, waiting for me to begin. He laughed softly when I said I was afraid of the first stroke, afraid it wouldn't be right. "You don't have to be right," he said. "You just have to begin." When we stopped at a gas station on the edge of nowhere, the neon buzzing overhead, we shared coffee from paper cups that tasted mostly like cardboard. But sitting side by